So the next speaker is Mr. Joe Karlsson at
Yo!
Yo, what's up, sir?
Hey! I'm just glad to be here.
Appreciate it. I mean, I love the energy.
Thank you. I gotta be honest. I don't know how late it is where you are, but it's hard to get the energy at the end of the day. But I think I'm ready to bring it.
I'm gonna take it all from you.
I'm gonna ship you some coffee.
I'm actually not gonna take it off. I'm gonna give it back to our audience so they enjoy the sun and they listen to building your first GraphQL app with React. Am I right?
That's right. I'm so excited. This is such a fun talk. I haven't given it forever either, so this is gonna be a blast. Everyone's in for a treat.
Yay! Yay! Let's go. You want to go? You want to start now?
Yep, let's do it.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. Hey-o. This is building your first GraphQL client in React. It's also JavaScript too, right? But same difference. Let's just jump in, eh? Hey, did you know that GraphQL is used by all these companies? Did you know that? And a lot more. I just couldn't fit them on the slide. And did you know it is available in pretty much every major programming language, including all of these? It's a common misconception that GraphQL is like a tech, but it's really a specification for how we're building out RESTful APIs, or this new standard for RESTful APIs. So the more you know. Now, before we get started, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, thank you so much for coming here. These e-talks are super hard to sit through, and I really appreciate you bearing with me while we chit-chat here today. And I'm just thankful and honored and humbled to be here speaking with all of you today. I love you all so much. If you want to follow along today, you can scan that little QR code or go to joekarlsson.dev/GraphQL. That'll take you to a page with all the resources in here as well. I don't think I can comment in the chat here, which I wish I could, but alas, I cannot today. But go check that out. Anytime you see a little QR code, just know that that's going to take you to the resources. It's going to include videos, slides, links, resources, source code, whatever you need. I got you, baby. All right. Hey, what if you got a question? What do you do? Huh? Hit me up in the chat. I got the chat right up in the little thing over here, the little doobly-doo, or am I pointing the right way? There we go, on the other side here, right? Hit me up. Just hit me up. Ask me a question. I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. I'm keeping an eye on you. I got you, baby. All right, we got you. It doesn't disrupt my flow. I will have time at the end for questions, and I will be available for a Q&A panel here in, I don't know, like an hour or two. But who is this talk for? This is for people who are, you know, a little about JavaScript, you know, a little about React. I think we're pretty safe here at this conference. But it's most importantly, it's for people who are interested in learning about GraphQL. I think there's two types of people that go to conferences. One, it's expert, making sure they want to, like, they know everything about the thing that they already know about. And two, it's people who are interested in learning about if it's worth their time to learn this new piece of tech. So if you're interested in learning GraphQL or like kind of on the fence about it, like whether it's worth your time or not, this talk is for you. We're going to talk about the pros and cons, how to build it, a little sample app, whatever. But most importantly, none of that is for you. It's for you. It's for you. This talk is for you, even if none of those things are for you. I'm hoping you have a blast. I hope you learned something new about GraphQL. I hope you learned something new about React. And great. Okay, enough babbling. Who the heck is this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this douchey dude with a man bun and a mustache talking at me about GraphQL? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. My name is Joe Karlsson. I work for a little company called MongoDB. I'm a developer advocate and software engineer. It's great. It's a fancy title. Just basically means I get to chat with developers like you. If you are interested in hitting me up at all, best place to get to know me is on Twitter. I also make videos on TikTok. I post this all on Twitter too. But if you want to get a hold of me afterward, ask me questions, chat, whatever, hit me up on Twitter. That's the best place to do it. Again, link in the doobly-doo for all the resources here as well. And most importantly, if I say anything controversial here in this talk, please know it's my personal opinion, not the opinion of my employer, MongoDB. I love my job. I don't want to get fired. Please don't report me. It's if I say just know. I'm trying to give you some cool stuff. All right. what are we going to be talking about here today? A couple things. First of all, we're going to be introducing GraphQL for y'all. Next thing, I'm going to be talking about Apollo, which you maybe have heard about, but we're going to dig into it today. And then we're going to go through a sample app and show you to make queries and mutations using GraphQL, using real code. Now we're talking. All right. Let's jump in, right? I feel like I've been talking for forever. What is GraphQL? I don't know about you, but when I first started learning GraphQL, this is what I felt. It was a little intimidating. I didn't really get it. I heard everyone chit-chatting about it. I didn't know what they were talking about, though. But imagine this. Let's say you're working on an application, like a front-end React application, and you have an endpoint for your e-commerce store, right? You have some user. You can get some recent orders from your user, and it returns an array of SKUs. Okay, a SKU is like a short ID of an order or a product. Okay. Cool. Great. You're showing that on the DOM. You've got your React thing. You're mapping over all these. Awesome. But whoa. We're front-end application. We're developing React applications here. And it's never that simple. Requirements always change. Product managers want different stuff. Now, what your product manager is asking of you is a hydrated list of orders. So instead of just an array of SKUs, they want actual details about those orders. They want the order date and the name and the description and the price and the shipping date. They want all that information hydrated in that order. Uh-oh. Okay, so we're front-end engineers. We have to figure out how we're going to update this API. What are we going to do, huh? Well, you go back to the back-end team, and maybe you are developing the back. Maybe you're full stack, right? But another question remains. How do you actually change your API to reflect this new hydrated SKUs that you need to show on the DOM? You could do a brand new endpoint, get hydrated recent orders. Cool. Maybe you can call it something else, hydrated SKUs. Maybe you have a query at the end of it of your existing one that shows whether it's hydrated or not. Maybe you put a little option in the header. There's so many ways you could possibly do this, right? But the point I'm trying to make, though, is with REST APIs, there's no one standard for updating and changing and mutating your existing APIs. And it tends to be a pain in the ass. And as React application developers, a lot of the time we have to update and change stuff with the backend, right? Like we're requesting new information, we need new data, and it takes forever. Who needs it? REST, right? So as front-end application developers, what we're doing on the front end, typically, we're making many separate REST API calls out to separate REST services, and all those REST services are hitting up other databases and data stores or whatever, right? And sometimes you have to wait for one. Maybe I'll go get all that list of SKUs, and then maybe I have to go wait for it to come back, and then I'll have to go hydrate it, and then I'll have to go get some image information for it, and I may have to wait like 3 or 4 round trips before I can actually explain or show anything on the DOM to the end user. Ugh. Slow. I know people in here have experienced that. Let me know in the chat if you've had a similar situation at work. I know I have. Now, I think it's helpful to show some of the difficult parts about REST and explaining the problems that GraphQL is solving. So GraphQL works a little bit differently. So instead of having to hit several different services using a RESTful API, what you're doing is hitting a single GraphQL endpoint, and GraphQL is responsible for hitting up those services for you. It's one unified standard for all these different services. It could be tons of different parts of your product domain, right? Different parts. It's responsible for getting what you need from a single endpoint. You just say, I want this, and it gives it back to you. One round trip, that's it. Anyone intrigued yet? I would be if I were you. This is pretty damn cool. Okay. So why would you want to use this? Let's jump in, baby. Let's jump in. First of all, it's declarative, right? Just like with SQL, right? You're declaring what you want, just like how Michael Scott declared bankruptcy. He didn't know how it worked. All he's doing is just saying, I declare this thing, I want it done, and he expects it to be done. In GraphQL, it actually works that way. So with GraphQL, you're sending over an object structured in the way that you want the information back. You can change or update, modify anything back, and you will receive it in the way that you are structuring your request. So if we had those hydrated numbers or those hydrated SKUs from before, all we do is just say, like, give me these hydrated ones, and the endpoint structure the data we want back from that endpoint. And GraphQL returns exactly what we need. How dope is that? That's dope, right? You can use multiple collections of data. You're not limited to one data set, not one service. Another cool thing about GraphQL, it is validated and structured. What do I mean by that? So typically with a RESTful API, you have no control over the data and structure of what comes back. But if you're writing a GraphQL endpoint, you get to control the data types that come through on the request, but also get sent back. And with JSON, typically it's hard to do because you're just getting strings. But now we have control over invalidating the type of data that's being requested from the front end. Also, yeah. Okay, cool. Good time to mention this. So MongoDB, actually, we just released this. It's a GraphQL endpoint that sits on top of your MongoDB Atlas cluster. And since we know the structure of your data and MongoDB documents are objects, we can automatically generate a GraphQL endpoint for you based on your data. How amazing is this, right? And it knows the exact data types of what you're doing when you generate that request. It generates all of the query and mutations, all the get, post, puts, and deletes you might need with a typical REST API for you automatically. What I'm showing you right now is exactly what happens, right? If you look in the upper or the right-hand corner there, it says generate schema. All you're doing is making a query and it hits generate schema, and boom, you got a GraphQL endpoint made for you from scratch. If you're using MongoDB, it's so easy. Okay, so it can structure your data. MongoDB does this for you automatically. Amazing. Cool, right, y'all? It also facilitates collaboration. I've worked in large projects before. And what typically happens when you're doing a large project is, right, like with the example of the REST APIs, like my front-end teams, they all needed different kinds of data. All the back engineers are always trying to keep up with requests for changing requirements in the front end. But if it's all unified, you don't have to worry about that. All the teams are requesting all the data from all the services all in the same way, and they can exactly ask from the backend exactly what they need. So even if it slightly modifies what they need, it's super easy, right? You're just modifying that GraphQL request, and bada bing, bada boom, baby, it works. You're done. Unifying all your endpoints, especially if you work for a large company and you have tons of different services managed by a bunch of different teams, they're going to have a bunch of different APIs. They're going to have a bunch of different documentation. If it's even up to date at all, who knows? But it unifies that under a single place. Amazing. Also, did you know API versioning is an anti-pattern in GraphQL? You can phase out old data, but what is actually recommended is just leaving the old data there and like expanding what is possible to be requested from GraphQL. API versioning, no more. We don't care, right? It's a layer on top of your API that makes accessing that data so much easier. Also, fun fact, did you know you don't have to write documentation anymore with GraphQL? What? Right? No more Swagger docs. What's cool about GraphQL is actually, this is one of my favorite features of it. It's something called graphical. Everyone mispronounces this. It's graphical, not GraphQL. Like a graphical interface. Get it, y'all? But you no longer need to write documentation. And the reason for that is because there is now I'm showing you MongoDB generates this for you automatically. But with graphical, it shows you sample queries, and you can make query requests in the browser. And if you look on the right side of the page here, it has a documentation explorer. Over here, it shows you what you're writing and how to structure it and what it is and what it means, right? So the documentation is always up to date. You no longer have to do it, and it self-documents when you write a description for each of the endpoints and data types. Amazing. No more documentation. It's always live. It's always up to date, and you can always access it. It's incredible. It's a super great way to use it. So that being said, it facilitates collaboration and makes documentation writing obsolete, but a common misconception is that it makes communication obsolete. It does not. You still have to communicate with teams. You still have to work with your backend teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But okay. Also, it's super fast. This comes with an asterisk, which I'll be getting to in just a moment. But it will speed up your development time and also a customer's experience. So you will no longer be overfetching data. I know all the time I make API requests and I'm using maybe only a little bit of the data, right? I'm only using just an eensy beensy tiny piece of that data, but I'm getting sent just a massive amount of data. And the smaller you can keep your requests over the wire, the faster it's going to get sent to a client. right? Like if you have a tenth of a megabyte versus a gigabyte request being sent over, it's obviously gonna be faster for that data to be sent over the wire to you. The other thing to consider too with speed from a customer's perspective is no more round trips. Again, I've had this happen so many times to me, but I have to make multiple API calls. Maybe they're dependent on each other, right? I gave that example of the hydrated SKUs. We have to get that SKU numbers, then we have to make another request to hydrate them, and then we can come back and we get those images, and then we come back, and then we can actually display that to them. You don't have to do that anymore. You just ask for what you need with a single GraphQL request, and it gets it back to you. You got anyone's attention yet? I hope so. This is pretty fucking cool. All right, so back to the asterisks. Abstraction always adds a performance cost at a server level. So it's additional code your thing has to run through. It can make additional startup costs and it's additional maintenance costs. But if you're willing to deal with that, which it's honestly not that bad, and with MongoDB Atlas and GraphQL, you're just hitting a button. There's no maintenance, right? But like you do, if you're that is a concern you should take into account when adding an additional piece of code to your servers. Okay. Bottom line is GraphQL makes working with your data ridiculously easy. It's so easy. All right, let's do a quick recap here. So what is GraphQL? Well, the first thing we discussed here today was we compared REST versus GraphQL, right? We had REST, we talked about SKUs and changing those and those round trips, and GraphQL being a unified way to access that data. Next thing we talked about is some of the pros of using GraphQL. And the first one was declarative, right? We're just declaring what you want. You don't care where it comes from or who gives it to you, but I just want this data. I want it in this way, and it's super easy to get that back. It's validated and structured, right? You can structure the data the way you want it to. Unifies all of your endpoints by facilitating collaboration. You don't have to write documentation anymore because you can use graphical. Amazing. No more API versioning. And bottom line, hey y'all, GraphQL makes working with your data ridiculously easy. It's incredible. It's a game changer. All right, so GraphQL. We covered basics here. Next up, Apollo. If you never heard of Apollo, that's okay. I'm going to tell you why you should know about it if you're interested in getting into GraphQL. So I want to do that by digging into a practical project. So I actually built a project. It's an Instagram clone called InstaPost. I don't know if that's legal, but hey, I did it. Basically, you can upload, or it allows you to host images or like show images on the web and give a little description to it. But it's hosted in a MongoDB database. And it's got all the basic get, post, put, update, delete operations you're used to with a typical RESTful application. But now we're doing it with GraphQL. All the source code is available if you go to the little QR codes. But the stack for this is all in the cloud. The backend is all in the cloud. It's a serverless application. It's hosted at a MongoDB Atlas database in the cloud. And we're using a GraphQL endpoint hosted on top of that database in the cloud on MongoDB. On the client side, all we're using is Apollo with React. All right, so Apollo. We still haven't dug into it yet. So let's jump into just a brief introduction of Apollo. First of all, Apollo was born from the ashes of the Meteor project. So it's the old Meteor team putting it together. I don't know if anyone here has used Meteor. I got burned by it when it fell apart, but Apollo was incredible, right? And what Apollo does is it's a wrapper for your front-end components. And it doesn't care what you are. You can use Angular, Vue, React, Ember, Backbone. It does not matter. But it structures and validates your queries and also does some caching for you on the front end. Bottom line, it makes working with GraphQL and React so much easier, right? It's responsible for kind of sending and receiving that result and then making sure all of your children components in your React application actually get those updates. It can automatically update state. Let me know, has anyone here ever used Meteor or Apollo or GraphQL? I'd love to know. All right. Again, makes working with GraphQL so much easier. Just take my word for it. I've tried making this demo without using Apollo, and it makes talking about it so much harder. So that's why we're going to be using it today. And if you're new to GraphQL and you want to try to play around with it with React, I would totally recommend starting with Apollo. It's going to make your life easier. Just trust me. So how do we actually set up Apollo with GraphQL and Atlas and MongoDB Atlas? Well, glad you asked. So first thing we're going to do is import Apollo from NPM. Awesome. And we have some config files here. And then next thing we want to do is connect to our GraphQL endpoint hosted on the cloud with MongoDB Atlas. All we're doing is basically saying we're passing a token over to authorize it. And we have to pass our Stitch ID through it. So it's basically that endpoint that I have there is the GraphQL endpoint, right? So that's our single unified endpoint. You sell Apollo. This is the one place to find GraphQL and send everything to that GraphQL endpoint. And we're doing an HTTP link, just saying it's an HTTP endpoint we're connect to. And then we're instantiating a Apollo client there at the very bottom. Awesome. That's if you can see my mouse there. There we go. Okay. And we're doing some in-memory caching here too, which is kind of cool. Okay. So this is the interesting part though. So we told Apollo where our GraphQL endpoint was. We had some config files. Next thing we want to do is connect it to React. So we have our React application, and Apollo actually has React hooks built in the provider, which is very cool. So we have our GraphQL endpoint. Okay. Oh, this part, we already saw this part, top part. The bottom part here is the interesting part. So we have our React application we're trying to initialize. And if you're used to using Redux in React, you're probably used to seeing this, right? The Apollo provider wraps our React application, so all of our children components have access to the React hooks from Apollo. That's going to allow us to do queries and mutations from any React component and update the work in there, right? Update state. Okay, whew. Awesome. So we wrapped our React application in a Apollo provider and connected it up to our GraphQL endpoint. But let's do a quick recap here of what we just discussed. What is Apollo? Well, the first thing we discussed was introduce our app that we're going to be working with today, Instaposts. It's going to be using MongoDB Atlas on the back end with a GraphQL endpoint hosted on Atlas as well. And then the front end, it's a static front end. We're using Apollo and React. Next thing we did was we discussed how it works, right? Apollo is a wrapper that works with any front-end framework, and it basically makes working with an updating state for those components much easier. Then we set up Apollo with GraphQL and Atlas, right? We just tell it where that GraphQL endpoint is, and then we instantiate a brand new Apollo client. Amazing. And then we connected Apollo to React. And once we've instantiated that Apollo client, all we're doing is wrapping our React components in the Apollo provider, so all the children components have access to all of those React hooks that allow us to update state and make queries and mutations for that component. All right, cool. So we talked about what is GraphQL. We talked about Apollo. Now for the fun part, let's talk about making queries. Let's talk about mutating data. So, right, there's two ways, like we're used to get post, put an update, get post, update, and delete. Those are hard to say. But with REST, but with a GraphQL, the only thing we have is queries and mutations. Queries is basically the equivalent of a get, and mutations would be a put, update, or delete. Anytime we're like changing the data, we just call it a mutation generally. All right, so this is the fun part. MongoDB automatically generates all the queries for you based on your schema by clicking a button. Let's see that again. Right, so you can see all of the mutations automatically generated for you once you generate your schema. And you can see all your queries, right? It tells you what data you have access to query from your database. So easy, right? Hit a button, it literally does it all for you. Okay, so if you want to actually construct a query, what does that look like? So the first thing you want to do is define whether it is a query or a mutation. Next thing you want to identify for GraphQL is what kind of data are you or do you want to query? So I have a collection called Instaposts. Each document in that collection is a single image from my Instapost gallery. And then the next thing you need to define is structure what you actually want to do with that data. So I want to get the unique ID, I want to get a description, and my React application needs the image URL, because those are the three things I need to display and work with that data correctly, right? So that's pretty easy, right? You're just saying, this is a query, this is what I want, and these are the things I want to do with that data with my application. That's all you need. So if I want to actually make a real query with Apollo and React, how do I do that? So same thing, right? We're defining a React component here. We're going to bring in our React hooks, and we're going to define our GraphQL query. So we just constructed it in the last slide. So I'm just going to copy paste that in there. I'm using a package called GraphQL tag. It basically allows you to just do a string tag, a string literal, and copy pasta your GraphQL query in there. Bada bing, bada boom, baby. It just works, right? Next thing we have our React component here. And what we're doing is using that React hook from Apollo to make a query for us, and we pass through that GraphQL tag that we defined up here. So we're just pasting that into the use query. And what's happening every 500 milliseconds, or once every half a second, it's querying to GraphQL using this query. And then Apollo has 3 states it returns back for you. It's either loading, it aired out, or it returns data. And we can conditionally show data in a React application based on what returns from that GraphQL endpoint. Everyone with me so far? Any questions? Remember, I keep an eye on the chat over here. Let me know if you have any questions, all right? But let's take a look at this in action, huh? Let's see what happens. So I have booted up my application here. You can see it's making a post request every second. It's querying every half a second, every 500 milliseconds, and it's returning a complete list of my Insta posts with the data I requested, right? ID, description, and image URL. Let's see that again. You can see there every half a second, you see that new network request going out to my GraphQL endpoint. And you can see all the data in there with all of the Insta posts that I'm requesting in the data structure I requested from GraphQL. Amazing. That's it, right? And it's being displayed on the DOM. It's just mapping over, boom, bada bing, bada boom, baby. Just works. All right. That's amazing. Making queries is so easy. It's so easy. Okay, so let's do a quick recap here. With GraphQL, how do you make an effective query? Well, I think I'm running out of time here too, but MongoDB automatically generates all the queries for you automatically. And if you did want to construct one, right, to hit up your endpoints, you have to know 3 things. You have to know whether it's a query or mutation. You have to say what you want to query, and then you want to say what data you want from that thing that you're querying. And then we showed how to actually make a query with GraphQL, Apollo, and React. Oh, right. We're using the use query Apollo React hook. We're querying every 500 milliseconds, and we're just passing that query over, and Apollo handles all of that for us automatically. So we just pass that query through. Apollo knows where the endpoint is, it sends it over, and it has 3 different states for us to conditionally show or hide that data, right? Loading, error, and data. Easy. Okay. How to play with error, as someone asked. Yeah, error, I mean, you can always use the React or the error boundaries, which is always good with React. You should always have those. But as you can see here, I'm just have a simple React component that shows there. I mean, you just want to make sure that the user has a good experience if something happens with anything in flight, right? Either you can fall back to caching data, but you just want a friendly error message to pop up. I just have one that says encountered an error, and it passed the error through. Probably not super user friendly, but for the sake of this demo, it's super easy to whip up, right? All right, last but not least here, mutating data. This is the hard part. Making queries is pretty easy. Mutating data is slightly harder, but I do want to show it here today. So if you wanted to actually construct your own GraphQL mutation, same thing applies here, right? You want to say whether this is a query or mutation you're making to this GraphQL endpoint. Today, we're going to be mutating. Next, you can make an operation name. Think of this as a function name like you would have in JavaScript, right? Like it describes the mutation that's going to be happening, so you can read it. It basically just makes it easier for humans to understand what this query is actually doing or how it's being used. So I have a mutation. I'm calling it create post. It's going to be pretty clear. This is going to be creating a brand new Insta post. Okay. Next thing I want to do is pass over arguments. Just like you would with JavaScript functions, you're passing over arguments, right, once you declare the function name, right? So this is the data you want to pass through in order to create a brand new post, right? Because you have to supply the image URL and the description at a minimum in order for Graph or for your server to know what to do with it, right? And that's what we need to save in our MongoDB database. And a little fun part here too, you can't do this in JavaScript, but the bang at the end of your query determines whether or not it's optional. So the bang means it's required. We absolutely need this because you can't create a post with no argument data being passed through it. It basically helps validate that the data is going through the way that you want it to. So these are the next thing you have to supply is the mutation type. So this is generated for you by MongoDB Atlas or like on your GraphQL endpoint. You can find out what these are by going into graphical and seeing all the different mutation types. We have one automatically generated called insert one instapost, and it takes the data that we need to pass through to it, which would be a description and image URL. Actually, in this part too, this is the data that you actually will be returned back to. This is like the receipt that it went through correctly. So it says like, once I've inserted it into the database, please supply me back with the ID, the description, and the URL. And that's it. That's it. So let's look quick little recap here. I'll show this later on at the end here. But let's actually do a real ass mutation with the React compliant. So we have our React components again. We're bringing in React. We're bringing in that Apollo React hook. Instead of using use query React hook, we're using the use mutation. And we're going to bring in that GraphQL project again. So we're going to just be pasting in that GraphQL mutation that we just constructed in the last slide, right? The same one. And then we have our create page here. So this is our React component. I just split it up because I ran out of room. That's the same thing here, right? And we have a little form. And on submit, all it's doing is taking data from the form and submitting that to the add post function. So once we do that, it fires off that that add instapost. That's all it does. Super easy. So we're doing that use mutation, and we're pulling out an add post in here, right? And then once we invoke that function on submit, React will use that React hook to fire that data off to your GraphQL endpoint and automatically insert that data into the database for you. That's it, baby. That's it. All right. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, yeah. On submit, then it does the add post. Okay, cool. All right, so let's see here. Let's take a look at this in action on the network. So on my new post here, I'm going to paste an image URL and a description. And I'm going to post it to our GraphQL endpoint. And I'm going to try to find that GraphQL endpoint, that post in our network. And you can see here, I found our create post. You can see that data being sent over the wire to our GraphQL endpoint. You can see that, boom, right? It's our request URL to that endpoint that we defined from our Apollo provider. We're saying this is our single endpoint, send this query over. This endpoint will know what to do with this when we structure the data in this way. And in fact, it does. You can see that it shows up on the thing, the main page, the index, right? Pretty cool. Anyone impressed yet? I hope I've impressed at least one person here. I hope at least one person feels impressed. I'm impressed. Okay, so let's do a recap here of the whole kit and caboodle. What is GraphQL? The first thing we did was to discuss the difference between REST and GraphQL, right? Next thing we discussed why you should be using GraphQL, and some of the things we first discussed was it being declarative. As a front-end engineer, we don't have to care where it's coming from or how it works or what database or service it comes from. All we say is, I want this data in this structure, get it back to me. It's validated and structured. It unifies all API endpoints, amazing for huge teams. You no longer have to write documentation. Graphical will change your life. No more API versioning. It makes working with data ridiculously easy, everyone. Listen, it makes it so much easier, especially if a huge team with a ton of different backend servers. It will change your life. All right, next thing we did was discuss Apollo. And the first thing we did was open up by talking about my project, Instapost, and it is a MongoDB database on Atlas. With Atlas, you automatically can click a button that generates all of your GraphQL schema and an endpoint for you and graphical just instantly for you. And we have a static front end that uses Apollo and React. We talked about how Apollo is a wrapper, and it's agnostic to what framework you're actually using. For this project, we actually used React. This is a React conference, but you can use Vue, Angular, whatever. It doesn't matter. Then we set up GraphQL with Atlas, and all you really have to do is just paste in your GraphQL endpoint and instantiate your provider with some additional options in there if you want. And then we connected Apollo to React, and it was super easy. All we did was wrap our Apollo provider around our React application, so all of the children component have access to the React hooks and can share an update state. Woo! All right, making effective queries. We made our first query here, right? MongoDB automatically generates queries for you. It's incredible. It's a game changer. You click a button, we know the structure of your data, right? If you hit that button, it automatically generates a GraphQL endpoint for you. If you do want to construct a query, all you have to do is discuss whether it is a query or mutation. You have to say what the data you want to query, and then tell it what data you want back from that data type. Oh, all these are yellow. Who knew? And then we discuss how to query with GraphQL and Apollo and React, right? We use the use query Apollo provider React hooks, and we just pass through that query to the use query React hook, and it automatically returns data in 3 different states, which we can conditionally show, either loading, error, or data. Woo! All right. Oh yeah, security. Yeah, we can talk about security. MongoDB, so you can totally secure anything. You can do user permission, so only you have access to do certain things, or only certain users can do queries, and some people can do mutations, or I can conditionally only update my data, and I can't update your data of the same type. You can totally do that. You could also make it work with multiple MongoDB databases and collections, so it doesn't all have to be in the same MongoDB collection. Okay, and then we talked about mutating data, so we can talk about how to construct a query, or a mutation, excuse me. GraphQL mutations with Apollo and React. Yeah, then we talked about how to do it. So instead of using that use query provider, we're using the use mutation Apollo provider, and it creates a React hook for us that we can just create a function, and we just pass through the data that we need in order to create that mutation on the back end. Or in this case, it's a post, right? This is a GraphQL equivalent of a post. All right, cool. I'm wrapping up here. I think I got a couple minutes left. So if I've inspired anyone in this audience or watching this talk today to want to learn GraphQL, how do you do it? What's the best way to become a GraphQL expert? Okay, this is gonna suck. I'm so sorry, but I would recommend building it. Like if this talk has inspired you to want to become a GraphQL master, amazing. What I would actually recommend you do is clone the project I built, the Insta-clone or the Instapost project, which you can be found here, right, at joekarlsson.dev/GraphQL. That has linked to the source code. I'd recommend cloning that, setting up your own GraphQL database in the cloud, and messing around with it. Typically, if I want to learn a new piece of tech, I'll start with something that works, and I'll start adapting it based on the needs that I have. Right? So like you can just but get it working, play around with it, get in there, get dirty with it. If you want to totally get that hooked up. If you want $100 in free Atlas credits, which is the MongoDB cloud option, use code JoeK100 or scan that QR code. There's information in the thing about how to get that too. I've never gone over the free credits on MongoDB. It's pretty generous for the free tier. There's always a free tier, but hey, it's always good to have a little bit of buffer room, baby. You know what I mean? Just in case. Who knows? Maybe you have a project that blows up and you need it. Then you'll be thanking me, okay? Here's some additional resources: GraphQL docs, Apollo docs, source code, a MongoDB GraphQL docs. You should totally check that out too. Lastly, too, I'm just going to do a quick plug. If you want to learn about MongoDB, there's a free university course. You should totally check that out. It's incredible. We have a brand new developer hub. It's got blog posts, Twitch streams, YouTube videos, every language you want, tutorials, whatever. And lastly, if you have questions or things about MongoDB, want help with your MongoDB project, check out our MongoDB community forums. We'd love to have you there. It's incredible stuff there. Okay, let's see here. Any other questions? I'm looking through the thing here. Amazing. Been working with GraphQL about a year. Impressed. MongoDB security. We talked about that a little bit. Okay, 12 hours. Awesome. Favorite talk so far. Love it. Let's see here. I'm not quite done, Pedro. I'm almost done here. And then I'll sign it over to you. But if anyone wants to follow me for more, hit me up on Twitter. These are all my contact information. Again, all the resources are in the little doobly-doo. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much, everyone. I love you all so much. Thank you. Okay. Pedro. Oh, you're still muted. Oh, he's gone. He's back.
I'm back, baby.
He's back.
Baby is going to be a favorite for all of this.
It's new for me. I'm beloved doing it.
But we're going to declare the bankruptcy? Yeah. I felt so bad actually right now because I wanted to go with we're going to declare bankruptcy. I mean, that thing was a blast, man.
Oh, love
The
it.
energy, yeah, the outspokenness, the empathy, the style,
I
the
feel like a lot of
lips.
tech people don't bring the energy in their talks, and it sucks. It's a dry subject. I just try to have some fun with it, you know.
I think your main competitor of late now night show host, uh, any of them will work.
I'll
I
take it. I'll take it. Hey, oh yeah, by the way, I do Twitch streaming. I'm Twitch streaming tomorrow on the MongoDB Twitch at noon Eastern
everyone,
time. Anyone
everyone
should
gonna
jump in. Otherwise, yeah, I make funny videos on TikTok and Twitter, so you should totally come check that out there too. I don't know if I can post that
definitely
anymore.
get those gifs showing up when somebody donated.
Yes.
Those memes are from The Office. I
Ah,
swear.
yes. Yes, they are. Yeah, you got that reference.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, like
yeah.
a couple people in the audience got them too, which is always good. Sometimes jokes fall. That's fine. We just got a couple more queued up in case something fails. You know what I mean?
We're gonna tell Vucha baby girl. Well, that's what we do.
Oh, I love it.
All right, Joe. So I'm waiting at the Q&A session for you because I feel it's so energetic, so positive. That energy is just over the
Oh, you can't
and
tell, but I'm blushing.
yeah.
No, I'm super excited. If anyone wants to ask me more questions too, I will be in the Q&A. I don't think I'm going to be able to answer a lot of the questions here in the chat here, but hit me up on Twitter. I'll be over there. I'd love to help field those if for anything I didn't have time for.
I'm gonna choose the best questions for you, specifically. I'm gonna send it out as a screenshot, so you're gonna print it.
That's
with
right. I'll include it in my next talk
Yeah.
too.
Sounds
Yeah, love it.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. You're so great. I love you all. You're the best. Good luck, everyone.
Allow you to that energy.
Bye.